Hi, it's Phil here from Revive My Ride and welcome to video 2 for my Porsche restoration project. So here's my Porsche 914, air-cooled Porsche behind me, and I promised you a walk around the car to scope out what work's required, so that's what I'm going to do in this video. What I will tell you in advance though is that I already knew that I had floor pans to put into this car because Denworks, who I bought from in the US, they were very open and honest and shared photos of areas of the car that needed work. But of course, any car seller, they're not going to start kind of drilling out rivets and removing panels from cars. And so they can only tell you what they can see. So it's not until you start investigating that you find out the real story. And I think most people are aware that with rust on cars, it's kind of like an iceberg phenomenon. So what you can see is only the tip of what's actually going to be lurking beneath once you start delving deeper. So what we're going to do here is start with the sills here on the driver's side, and remember this is a left-hand drive car. Move around to the back to the engine bay. It's a mid-engined car, so obviously the engine's back there. And then round to the sill on the other side. And on our way round the car we'll pass a place that all Porsche 914 owners call the hellhole. So yes, that is the term. If you talk to any 914 person, they'll know exactly what you're referring to, and that's a real problem area on this car. And to be honest, all cars have some kind of problem area. That happens to be the one on the Porsche 914, and it's always worth knowing what it is before you buy one of them. Okay, so I've done a bit of pre-work on this, to be honest. These rocker covers, or I call them a sill cover, they've got a series of rivets along the top and screws underneath, etc. And if you want to inspect your 914, it's always a good idea to pop these off. So this is just sat there, to be honest. I've already removed it, but I just wanted to show you. So you take this cover off, and what that reveals is what a lot of people refer to as the longitudinals. So this is like a jacking point at the back here, and then this all here is the longitudinal. And because this is a roadster car, this is what gives the car its strength. Yeah, so now that we have that rocker cover off, we can just have a really good inspect. You know, look at the jacking point, look underneath the car as well, and just follow this longitudinal all the way around to the front. And you can see a little bit of surface rust there, but it doesn't look too bad. Now that we've had a look at that, we'll just have a good look around, moving on to the engine bay next. Okay, so I'm just under the back of the car here, and as you can see, I've dropped the rear axle down and the engine and transmission. And that's because I wanted to give access to the bulkhead here, which separates the engine compartment from the passenger compartment, because this can be an area that gets a lot of rust. And in particular, that area that I mentioned a minute ago that owners refer to as the hellhole, it's actually up in this back corner here, and I'll show you some close-ups and in more detail now. Basically, the battery tray sits somewhere like that, and of course with a battery on top of it. And one of the issues is that water runs down under the battery tray into this corner here, and it just sits there. Or maybe if there are drain holes, then they get blocked up with leaves or whatever. And also because water's running over the battery, you know that kind of sulfur deposit that you get on top of batteries? Well, any of that sort of stuff, especially on the old batteries that these cars had, remember they're a 70s car, washes down into that corner and then sits there. Yeah, so all of this area here is the far corner with the passenger seat just on the other side of this bulkhead. And you can see this is all rusted away and horrible. So I've got the engine here, and I'll just let you guys have a look at that. They're actually quite easy to drop out of these cars. You drop them out the bottom, so as long as you have the ability to lift the car, you can undo the bolts, rest it on something, and then actually just lift the car off of the engine, if you know what I mean. So this engine was running when I took it out of the car, and actually I imported it as a running car. I have had it running, so I'm hoping that there's not too much work to do in this area. Okay, so this is a 2-litre flat 4 air-cooled engine, and as you can see it's running on twin carburetors. So obviously this one on this side will be supplying those 2 cylinders, and the other one supplying the other 2. There's a bar that connects them in the middle, and then the throttle cable pulls on them both evenly. Now actually this was a fuel injected engine, but often what you'll find is when they go wrong, they're very expensive and difficult to maintain. a lot of people go to carburetors, especially since, you know, a lot of people understand them better. And as you can see, it's quite a wide but shallow engine. And that actually gives you a pretty good low center of gravity, which is why Porsche have used them for so long. You know, they use them in the current Boxster. This 914 with the mid-mounted engine and the layout that it's got is actually seen as the predecessor to the Boxster by some people. Okay, so we finally made it over to the passenger side, so the right-hand side of the car. And of course there's another rocker cover here to remove. Which I've done, and you can see that I've been doing a little bit of work on it as well because it had some rust as well. And when I removed it, then I could see quite a lot of rust around this jacking point area. But what I couldn't see very easily was up inside here. But don't worry, it's not normally stuck together with duct tape. What I thought I'd show you guys is that once I knew panels behind here needed to be repaired and there was no other access, it became clear that I had to cut the quarter panel. So it might seem a little bit extreme to cut this panel out, but when I move it, you'll see that there's quite a lot of damage behind there. And I needed the access anyway to do the work that needed to be done. So I'll go ahead and peel that off. Okay, and so now you can see one of the big problems. So this hole here actually goes through to behind the passenger seat. So that goes right through. And then that rust that we saw earlier from under the battery tray from inside the engine compartment has come through and rotted some panels in these areas. Interestingly, the car hadn't lost all of its strength, because one thing that you do see with these cars when these longitudinals become really badly damaged is that your shut lines get affected. So the car starts to sag and then you can't actually close the doors. So the thing to mention is that because there's such a following on this car, panels are readily available, although they are quite expensive. And I'll give you an example of the expense because, you know, we're keeping up to date with the prices. So our total at the end of the last video was $9,350, which equates to £6,680. So what I decided to do was to buy new panels for this car. As I mentioned, there's a big following, and so that means that there's some suppliers out there for getting new panels for pretty much every aspect of the car, but especially the areas that are known to be problem areas. So I suppose this is the first learning that I want to share. So if you are wanting to go and find your own restoration project, you might have your heart set on a particular car, and if you do, then there's no change in your mind, you know, just go in with your eyes open. But the point I want to make is, even though they're expensive, panels for these cars are available. And so as a DIYer, it's a very different job cutting out old panels, doing some patching and some rust treatment, and then welding in new ones, to completely fabricating panels yourself, which is a skill all in itself, which of course you can learn, but you'll need some equipment for it. And then obviously it's very time consuming as well. So the problem that I got is I was trying to get these panels ordered before Brexit came through. The ports all got jammed up, my panels got stuck, and it kicked through into post-Brexit. And as a result, I ended up with £200 more to pay in import duties. Okay, so what did I get for that amount of money? Well, to be honest, what I really got was 5 main panels that I needed. Don't get me wrong, there's still some patching to do of some existing panels, and I'll talk through them quickly here, and then I'll just show you on the car where they fit, because it's always hard to visualize where it goes on the car. So this small one here, this actually goes inside the engine bay, and it's adjacent to that hellhole area that I talked about earlier. Okay, so I'm standing pretty much in the engine bay now. And as I mentioned before, you know, water, battery acid and all the rest comes down and corrodes this panel really badly. Well, let's have a closer look at it. And now if we offer the panel in place, you can see, hopefully, that it's going to do most of the repair once I get it pushed into that corner fully. And this one here is the longitudinal, so that really horrific hole that I just showed you a minute ago. And it's actually a reinforced panel as well, so you can see that there's this panel that's been spot welded into the back of it. So this is actually quite a heavy piece. And so you can see this edge here, it's going to line up here once I remove this section. And you can see that this actually extends quite a way up into the car. Obviously there's going to be a little square to cut out here for the jacking point. But if I lift that up, you can kind of visualize where that's going to fit and how much it's going to patch and, well, not patch, how much it's going to replace. And when you're fitting these, you don't actually have to use the whole panel. So the option's there, of course, to fit this whole panel. But if you start cutting away and you get back to good metal, then you can actually mark up and use a piece of this in order to do the repairs that you need to do. And then this one here, it actually goes inside the passenger compartment up against the bulkhead with the engine bay. Okay, so that's just offered into place. So it's going to take a little bit of bending and shaping to get into position. So that's behind the driver's seat on the far side, and then the passenger side here. And then obviously you can see the big hole where the floor pan's going to come up against it. So this one here is actually a non-standard part. So it's actually a reinforcement panel. I call it an improvement, if you will, that Restoration Design have come up with. And this runs along the whole rocker panel on this side. So once I've finished the work and I've repaired the hole that I talked about just a minute ago, then I've got the option to weld in this reinforcement panel, which will give it additional strength. And that's just because this is obviously a weakness area of the car. So if I can reinforce it and make it stronger, then the car is going to last that much longer. And then the rear half floor pan we're already familiar with. Full disclosure, I just got stuck in cutting out these floor pans because this was the area I was aware of, especially on the passenger side. I suppose I kind of charged headlong into it rather than planning, which is quite unlike me really. I was aware that there was wiring and brake lines and other things in this area, so I was quite careful when I was cutting around here. Of course there's a fuel tank in the front and an engine in the back, and so a fuel feed gets to the back somehow, and as it turns out, it also goes through this tunnel. So what I'd say about this particular car, and it probably applies to lots of them, is you're probably best just getting the fuel tank out and making sure the fuel lines have been allowed to drain down before you do any work at all. So that's going to be my next job. Okay, so that gets you up to date with where the Porsche restoration project is. Some of this work I had done before I started doing a video series, so that's why you didn't see the engine get pulled out and you didn't see the interior get removed. But from now on we're real time and there'll be no sneaky work on the big jobs going on without you guys seeing it. Next job, fuel tank out, and then I really want this floor pan in. So hopefully you'll want to join me on this Porsche restoration journey that we're on. If so, please subscribe and click the bell and you'll be notified of my next video. And if you have any comments or questions at all, please post them below, I do read them. Okay, thanks for watching and I'll catch you next time.